And Fox News election alert for you now. Fox News can now project that businessman Donald Trump will win South Carolina's Republican presidential primary, although not by the double-digit margin that pre-election polls had suggested. Still, this makes back-to-back victories for Trump, who more than doubled the vote of his closest competitor in New Hampshire last week. Texas Senator Ted Cruz and Florida Senator Marco Rubio remain locked in a battle for second place tonight.
Let's bring in our panel now for reaction to this big win for Donald Trump. Not as big, Steve, as was projected going in. He was up by 13 in the average of polls heading into this day, but still a win and still significant for the Trump campaign.
Yeah, very significant. Look, a win is a win in this case for Donald Trump. This is somebody who, to go back 6 months ago, to go back 9 months ago, people weren't thinking that Donald Trump was going to win anything. He was often regarded, myself included, as a candidate who was going to be sort of a novelty candidate, not somebody who was going to win. Huge credit to Donald Trump for doing what he's done just to win this primary.
And now, Kirsten, I believe the facts are that no Republican candidate in the history of the country has ever gone on to not get the nomination after winning both New Hampshire and South Carolina. So if Trump does not get this...
It's over, President Trump.
Well, I mean, if he doesn't get this nomination, it'll be the first time that's ever happened.
Yeah, it will be the first time, though. I do think if you look at the exit polls, things have tightened up for him a little bit. It's a little more of a three-way race, it looks like. And look, people have had time to think about this. This is, frequently people talk about how South Carolina is sort of the, microcosm of a GOP electorate, and he's running pretty tight. And if you look at 92% of the people voting said they're dissatisfied or angry with the federal government. Those should really be Trump voters. That's really, his sweet spot. And he got 31% and Cruz got 26%. That's not that huge of a margin. So I think we have to wait and see if we are starting to see a sort of tightening among the candidates, or if, not necessarily that Trump's running away with it.
We're looking live at Trump headquarters in Spartanburg. I'm not sure they have the news yet. We might want to turn the channel. Dana, this is, from here, Trump can build on this momentum. He talks about he's self-funding. I think there are people donating to his campaign, but he has momentum now heading into the series of states, Super Tuesday.
There's no doubt. He certainly does. I think a couple of interesting points here. I thought that Kirsten's is important. Also, if you look at the number of people who said the most important thing to them is voting for somebody who can win in November, that number is actually very different than these results. 49% of people said that would be Marco Rubio. 21% said Cruz, and 18% said Trump. So if you are at this point in the Trump campaign, you have to start thinking, I'm going to start needing to convince people that I can actually win in November.
But this is a message about anti-establishment, anti-Washington. Turn the table around.
The top three are all a road less traveled for the Republicans. Typically, Republicans like to go with the next guy in line, somebody very safe. That is not the case, at least certainly with Trump and Cruz. And I think that Rubio would put himself in that category, having taken on Charlie Crist in Florida and run as a Tea Party candidate just almost 6 years ago.
So now, Juan, we know what's going to happen tonight. Whoever comes in second, whether it's Cruz or Rubio, is going to come out and declare victory, saying, we weren't expected to finish second, and here we did. And the third place finisher is going to say, I was inches behind that other guy, and I'm also in it to stay. And then the headlines are going to be, this is a three-man race, right? That's what we're going to hear. But is it realistically? I mean, what does it mean now that Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio are going to finish in one order or the other, second and third tonight?
Well, I think two things need to be said. One is I think Rubio had a great night, a real comeback from New Hampshire, where he underperformed. Now, today, when we look at the numbers, as we can see from the polling so far, you would say that Donald Trump didn't perform below expectations. He pretty much met expectations in terms of what we saw ahead of time. It's the fact that Cruz and Rubio exceeded expectations, and Cruz especially, I think, can say that, you know what, nobody thought. People really doubted me down here, didn't know if I had the money, the organization, etc. He's done very well, and he's done well. I'm surprised that he has ended up splitting the evangelical vote with Trump, as I said before, but he has every reason now to carry on. I don't think, though, that you would say, to play with candidate casino, Brett Baer's thing. I think you'd have to say, of course it's Trump at this point. Trump looks like he could run the table. I'm picking up his language, but it sure looks that way to me.
I love Candidate Casino.
I know.
I always watch that on Fridays.
Well, thank you. Panel, thank you. Let's go to Trump headquarters. Chief political correspondent Carl Cameron is there in Spartanburg. Carl, do they have the word yet? Do you want to turn around and tell them?
Well, they know. A handful of them have been chanting, "We want Fox" for a while now, because they know that we've called the race and other networks and others have not. Donald Trump has rewritten the history books. It's been said for decades that Iowa and New Hampshire winnow the field, which is to say they cull it down and eliminate some of the candidates, but that South Carolina picks the most conservative candidate who can win. So the Palmetto State's first in the South primary voters are saying that that man is Donald Trump. He's here in the hotel here in Spartanburg, where he's had his election night headquarters planned. And this is the part of the state where a great deal of the conservative voters are concentrated, and he campaigned here hard. He picked this location rather than Columbia, the state capital, or rather than down on the seacoast and Myrtle Beach for the golf courses. He wanted to come up here and send a message. And it's a message that he now will take to Nevada and other states. And it's worth noting that he has expressed a certain amount of caution, almost a quizzical nature, saying, I don't know about these caucuses, because, of course, he didn't win the Iowa caucuses. Ted Cruz did, and the Nevada caucuses are next week, and it's a much different type of campaign. Given the momentum he appears to be rolling out of South Carolina with, the Nevada caucuses may sway his way, and he has been suggesting on the campaign trail literally since Iowa that if he won here in South Carolina, as Juan said, he could run the table. It is a terrifying thought for the so-called Washington establishment lane. So many Republicans have been talking about the necessity of the field to be cleared out so that only one or two other non-Trump candidates could coalesce the non-Trump vote. That's why the pressure on the back tier, the second tier, those three candidates who don't appear to be competitive tonight, will be so intense. And while all of them said they had plans to go on to other states, the questions and the doubts will come first and foremost from their own donors and supporters, who may think that it's just too late going into the rest of this race when it gets nationwide, particularly on March 1st for the Super Tuesday, so-called SEC southern states. And it'll take a lot of money and a lot of organization, and that erodes when you don't come in the top three.
You know, Carl,
Right.
It's clear that the turnout was massive today. The absentee ballots double. It looks like anecdotally that all across the counties, they reached their 2012 levels at 2 o'clock this afternoon. That obviously means that Trump energized people coming out to the polls. It's a little bit closer than thought. Also, Donald Trump spent $1.78 million, the campaign did, on ads. Marco Rubio spent $12 million. Jeb Bush spent $15 million. I mean, this is an economic success, this campaign.
It plays into Donald Trump's sort of throw weight with his rhetoric, his ability to resonate in an evening interview right into the morning shows, or to call into a morning show on television and have that drive the political debate during the course of the day. There is absolutely no doubt that Donald Trump has eliminated the necessity of big data for many of these candidates. They spent hundreds of thousands of dollars in the case of the Rubio campaign more than 2.5 years ago on big data to prepare for this. The Bush campaign and the money that he raised before he became a candidate, over $100 million for the Right to Rise super PAC that is now independent from him, has been spending it at an amazing rate, and yet we see Jeb Bush back in that second tier, and perhaps watching John Kasich beat him in South Carolina, a candidate who isn't even here tonight. Those are the types of things that these second-tier candidates will be facing. This is the kind of, there they got it. And there it is.
We ought to turn the channel.
The folks in Spartanburg have just finally heard what Fox News viewers have been hearing, and perhaps the Trump campaign will switch the channel, recognizing that the reaction here is a few minutes too late for their own supporters.
As we could hear the chanting, "We want Fox" in the background. Carl, question for you about that third tier. You know, the Ben Carsons, John Kasich. Do those guys need money to stay in? Do they need money to stay in?
Well, Ben Carson has been running sort of an organic campaign. What we call his burn rate, how much it costs him to run and how much he raises, has been very high. But he has a very strong organic base. John Kasich has been doing it with a lot of money and advertising coming from his super PAC, not his campaign. Jeb Bush has been batting back rumors and assertions that